Okay, I think I got it under control. Hi, Allison. Let's jump in and others can catch up as they join. So hi, everyone. It's nice to know you're here. Thanks for coming back after kind of a wacky class. It gets wackier today. And then next week we talk about hell beings and hell realms. So hang on. I think it'll be fun if you're, we'll see. But we're on class 6. This is Death and the Realms of Existence. From scrolling through, I think everyone here has been to a Dharma class before. And it's okay if you haven't, but I recognize most of you. So let's just launch in. As I mentioned last time, I'd love for the second half of the course, which we're officially in. Perhaps we won't meditate quite as long together. And instead use that time, we'll use the breakout room feature in Zoom and just try to, if you'd like, I know many people are eating or running errands or, in your own space, and that's fine. So you can also just listen. But if you'd like, just be in small groups and actually try to verbalize some of these concepts and ideas. And it's also a time to bring up questions and doubts and new discoveries. So I thought we would do that specifically to review the last class. And for those following along with homework and quiz completion for course certification, those are the questions we'll focus on. So you can absolutely fill in your quiz or homework real time. Yeah. But before we dive in, let's open the mandala, get into a state of mind. Oh, actually, this class, we're going to talk a lot about what does the mandala actually mean? What are we actually doing? But if anyone feels so called, could you share in non-Buddhist language what goes through your mind when you're holding this gesture and chanting these words? And I'm really not looking for an answer that's correct or good, but more interested in the answer that helps free your mind from whatever story you've been in all day and lets you know, okay, now I'm doing something different. Now I'm investigating the thing behind all things. If you have that relationship with this offering or this thing that we do to start classes. So I'll just open it up if anyone wants to unmute and share. What do you think about when you do this? What are we doing? Yeah, go ahead. Can you
I'll say that I like to chant it when we offer it, and it's like just really beautiful to chant it. And when I read the English translation of it, I get filled with joy and delight, and it's such a beautiful, vivid imagery that beautiful, vivid imagery gets created in my mind as I follow along with the English translation, and it like really feels like paradise. It really feels like when I get to the line, the paradise of a Buddha, I'm like, yeah, like that is what I see in my head. It really feels like paradise. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that you have that experience with it. And also hearing you use the word vivid, I think it's really beautiful. The idea is that this is like a visualization meditation that you're doing as you're chanting these words, right? And so, as I said, we're going to go like into detail what is the mandala, but traditionally the idea is you actually try to close your eyes and hold the entire universe as you can conceive of it in your mind. And then, so you're not like imagining a new world. You're just first trying to conceive of the world as it exists for you in your mind, and then begin to transform that very world. So what I like about it, it's not as much escapism as like real-time transformation, mind transformation. or mind alchemy. It's like you take the elements that you see or the places you're picturing, or maybe it's people or animals, whatever your imagination does, and you start to turn and change those very things. So you don't have to share, but I do encourage you to just ask yourself, what's your relationship with this little ritual that we do at the start of class? It's meant for you. It is meant to feel weird and different and jolt you out of whatever normal state of mind you've been in. And maybe you haven't even been aware that it was a normal state of mind throughout your day. And it's not for anyone's sake, but your own. It's so that the words that we shared tonight can land for you as the realizations you need to have, you want to have, the answers that you're looking for. Would anyone else like to umse? That's what you call like the chanting master who leads us in this chant. Anyone? Yeah, Viggy, please. And I'll just switch the slide for you when it gets to that point.
Marissa doesn't seem excited at all at the thought of like me singing.
That's not true.
All right, let's make the, I forget what it's called, but the thing with the hands. Yeah. Sashi Puki Jukshin Metoptram Rira Blingshi Ninde Genpati Sangye Shingdu Mikte Wagi Drokun Namdak Shingla Chuparshok Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nritayami Sangye Chudang Soki Chuknamla Jangchuk Bardo Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chanyen Gepe Sunam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupashok Sangye Chudang Soki Chugnamla Jangchu Bardo Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chanyen Gepe Sunaki Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho Sangye Chudang Soki Jugnamla Jangchu Padu Dakni Gyapsuji Daki Chanyen Gipe Sunamki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupashok.
Thank you both. It was really nice to hear you harmonizing. All right. So here we are. We're at class 6, halfway through the course. So here you can see where we're coming from, where we're going. Just try to quickly catch your mind up, mentally reviewing the different realms we've talked about, maybe the causes that would propel someone to become a being in one of those realms. The portal between the realms, right? There's not a door that leads from one realm to another, but rather that inevitable moment of death, that in-between stage, which we spent 2 nights ago talking about. So just start to mentally kind of flavor your mind with those things. And then what I thought we'll specifically do, so we spent last class talking about the bardo, right? Here are 5 questions. They come from the homework, and they're the quiz questions actually, that encompass the essence of what there is to take away from this commentary in the Abhidharma Kosha about this bardo state, this time between death and the next rebirth. So what I thought, there's 5 questions and there's like 25 of us, something like that. Oh my God, I love when this math works out. There are exactly 25 of us, or I won't put myself in a group necessarily, but the number of breakout room that you're in corresponds to the number question that you, I guess I can't decide. What would you all prefer? Small groups where you just talk about all 5 questions, or would you like to have like a group specializing in each question and then you could come back together and sort of share the essence? Any strong preference?
I feel like maybe one question, because I guess it depends. I'm sorry, I missed it. How long do we have in the group?
I was thinking 10-15 minutes.
Yeah,
Maybe
then
10 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then we'll have like 5 to 7 minutes to kind of resolve anything or open any discussion with the whole group.
Yeah, I just worry that it's not enough time to talk about all of them, but rather like dive in a little deeper on one question given that time.
Cool.
But,
okay, let's do that. And then maybe we'll have, if there's anyone who feels particularly brave in each group, just be prepared to sort of share out with the rest of the group, like, hey, here's the takeaway from that question. And because I abbreviated the questions, let me just go through them quick. The first one is a logical proof of the existence of bardo beings. So we went over that last Tuesday. I gave you a hint. It has to do with a sprout. So we went over a logical proof and then a scriptural proof. So saying, oh, well, the Buddha said something, hint, they actually said 3 things that by implication prove that bardo beings must exist. So what are those things that he said? Then the third question is, who can see a bardo being? The fourth question is it possible to be diverted to another rebirth type? So for example, let's say you find yourself in bardo hell, meaning you're in this in-between stage about to be reborn as a hell being. At that time, is there anything you could do to divert to the animal realm or divert to the human realm? So we talked a little bit about that. And then the last question, according to the Abhidharma Kosha, I think this is actually according to a statement by the Buddha. How is it that a being enters the state of a human womb birth? We went over that in some detail. Yeah, so those are the 5 questions. You'll see in your breakout room, there'll be a number. The number that you have is the number question it corresponds to. We'll see, let's see what happens. And those of you who've studied ACI before or are currently studying multiple courses, which are many of you, I'll just ask you to take the lead just to make sure we're not veering off into anything too tangential, and use karma and emptiness, please, as the anchor of why are we talking about this? What's the point of talking about this? What are the implications? So with that, see you all in 10 minutes. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Everyone is in breakout rooms reviewing, so let me know if you want me to add you to one.
Oh, sure.
Or you can hang here, no biggie. They have maybe like 3-4 minutes more.
Talking about last class.
Yeah, exactly. Just I put the review questions up. And so yeah, each group, depending, there's 5 breakout groups, 5 questions.
Ah, okay. Well,
Or you can hang here.
how does that work? So when everyone else is in a breakout room, you just hang out?
And
you can
hang out in the ether alone, yeah.
Are we in the bardo realm now?
Honestly, it feels like it. We're in this in-between space.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
Where I can't see myself. Hold on.
I know, I'm not sure if you have your video on, but I can only see your name.
Okay. There we go. Hi. I'm on the couch today. Yeah, I tried to do the contemplation when I was going for a walk today, and I kept forgetting that I was doing it, and I came back to it,
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing to contemplate. What will it be like to be in the bardo room? or the bardo room, be born in the bardo realm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
course's meditations they're trippy.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, I usually like to do asana with Rose Erin right before this, but I wasn't able to today, so I feel a little floaty, but we'll see.
Yeah. Kidney 1, maybe.
Oh yeah, maybe, and no one will be able to tell if I'm just
yeah, you can press on
pressure there. So, honestly, usually, like if you can't see my hands, it's because I'm pressing on what is it? Yeah, for nervousness, right?
Yeah, heart 7 too is good.
I do heart 7 usually before.
For calming. Yeah. Yeah, the first training I did with Rose Erin, she was constantly pressing on herself.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, it was only the second training that she had done.
Oh, wow.
So I think she was still getting used to it,
Totally.
And she was always talking. And I think she was doing heart 7 most of the time, or I don't know what she was doing. I didn't really know the points that well then.
Yeah. I get
just learning them.
I get so nauseous in cars. I've always just had a problem being car sick, and now my whole family knows, like, as soon as I get into a car, I'm just like gripping myself right here. Is it 6 or I don't remember the names anymore, but like I remember the influencer points, right? What did she say? The famous points. That's what she said. And yeah, I'm just like gripping it the whole time.
Yeah, it's great. Does it help?
It does. It does. It actually just brought me back to that night where you really saved me. Remember?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. When you were nauseous. Yeah.
Yeah. The holiday party, right? The 3 Jewels holiday party, I think. Remember
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
I don't remember where we were coming from, but
we were definitely coming from 3 Jewels, because I remember dancing with the baby and Momo's in the cafe.
Yes. It must have been the holiday party, because I think that's the only time I've danced at 3 Jewels. Yeah. Yeah, and it was raining, and I felt so bad, but I was like, let me just hold this umbrella for you.
I felt immediately better after, but it was wild.
Yes, sometimes, you need that relief.
Yep.
Something needs to get out.
Okay, let me close the rooms, and that'll give them a minute to come back.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I don't know if for your all's upcoming training, it's really nice to have breakout rooms, like in asana training, where you would do that and then like guide each other in little asanas in the breakout rooms.
Oh, cool.
It's very easy to set up.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't. I wonder if my account can do that. I don't know.
I can show you sometime if that's helpful.
Okay.
I think you have to enable it from like your settings on zoom.com. Words are hard for me today, so this will be interesting.
Yeah.
And then it pops up.
Okay, cool.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Sarah.
Now mute.
Okay, sounds good. I think everyone's back. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Good. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, but let's try this. Mute all. Okay, so anyone from group 1 care to share, please? What is the logical proof that we're working with for the existence of bardo beings? And if you want to share more than just the correct answer, that would be great. Like, what did you all talk about? What came up?
We just talked about how like a plant, before it gets bigger, it has to go through like an intermediate period where it's a sprout. So from seed to sprout to plant. So that's proof that there's a in-between stage in probably everything.
Cool, perfect. Is this Nicolette speaking?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just had to connect. Perfect. Yeah, and I think it is nice to contemplate that. Like, is there an in-between stage for everything or not? I think that's up for argument, but do sit with the proof that for anything that exists on a continuum, right? Anything that you see growing or changing, but with some sort of thread of continuity, there must be an intermediate point between A and C. There must be a B. So cool. Yeah, that's the logical proof for why it's completely feasible to find yourself as a bardo being in a bardo realm. Yeah? What about a scriptural proof? So remember, something that someone would take on authority because they have a valid perception that a being such as a Buddha, an enlightened being who could only speak the truth, who the only motivation in their mind is to teach others, not in like a self-serving way, but teach others in any way possible, appear in any form possible to get them to realize the nature of their own mind and their own world. So only someone with that type of motivation, if they say something, you have that relationship with them or their teachings, you would take everything they say as truth, right? Even the seeming contradictions, you'd say, oh, there's something they're trying to show me there. There's some sort of interpreting I have to do to get the lesson. So what were those 3 statements from the Buddha? Any group 2 peeps?
Okay, I'll answer. The Buddha says that there has to be a suitable mother, in other words, a fertile female. The Buddha said there has to be desired, 2 people having sexual intercourse, and then there has to be a bardo being present who he calls a smell eater, because that's how bardo beings keep alive by eating smells.
Perfect. If anyone wasn't here last class, that probably sounded really strange, but we'll get to it more. I see Kelly smiling. I can't remember if you were there or not on Tuesday, Kelly. So we'll get to that more. I think question 5 sort of answers, how do those 3 things come together to produce the experience of being in a womb? Like, what do those 3 things have to do with each other? But yes, the scripture it's coming from is the Buddha was describing what are the conditions necessary for birth. And it's those 3 things that Suzanne mentioned. And because the 3rd thing he said was, oh, a bardo being needs to be close by, people could take that as proof as, oh, well, bardo beings must exist then, right? Okay, so that brings us to who can see a bardo being. You can chat it in if you're feeling really shy.
I suppose I can answer for our
Cam,
group.
I was gonna call you to say answer.
I was gonna call you out actually. So great minds think alike. Other bardo beings can see bardo beings. And also, Mackenzie brought up the point that if we eventually get to the point where we have the eye of God and we see everything, then we can see bardo beings.
Cool.
We had an interesting conversation about ghosts and how, you know, like ghosts as we know them as humans outside of a Buddhist context, and whether or not this word see in the question is intentional, and whether it's just see with our eyes, or is it all of our senses? Like, can humans have extrasensory perception and sense these bardo beings? And that was just interesting to think about.
Yeah, cool. So one thing in your response, I just want to clarify, you're spot on. You're like 90% there. So the one thing to remember with who can see a bardo being, yes, it's another type of bardo being, but remember it's only bardo beings of the same type. So
Okay,
if you're in bardo hell, you could see another bardo hell being, right? Or if you're in the animal bardo, as in the in-between state before you get reborn as an animal, you can see other bardo animals. But the idea is a bardo hell being couldn't see a bardo animal being.
Okay,
So,
great.
Right, like very much, you know, in the way that we are unexamined, you can only see those who look like you, and in that you confirm your own existence, right? You're just like, oh yeah, this is it, this is the world.
So a human would know that they're in the bardo because they wouldn't be able to see animals?
I don't know if it's that meta. I think they would just, the way we say, here's our world, and we've created all these models to understand the world, but we're not thinking, oh, here's our world, here's my human, I mean, I don't know, maybe you are, but here's my human rebirth, and here are other humans I see in their rebirth. So I'm not sure like what the model that they would put on it would be. The idea is that though they can see others in the same state of mind as them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
But they can also see the other realms, right?
Can they?
Well, if you're a bardo being, you're no longer in the human realm because you're in the between.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to the fifth question, which I was in, you have to see your parents. So you're seeing the human realm.
Yeah.
Which I would extrapolate is you're also going to be able to see all the other realms, because if you're going to one of the other realms, you might also be able to see that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, if you're bardo being from being deceased from being a human, but you're going to be reborn as an animal, would you at some point as a bardo being enter the animal bardo?
Yes. So you are in the bardo that corresponds to the birth you are about to take, not the one that you came from. But Thomas, your point is cool and makes me think. I don't know what that would, yeah, I don't know if bardo beings can see all realms or they could just see the one that they're about to enter. There's not too much, or I don't remember description of like the geography of the bardo realm. So that is cool to think about. And maybe if anyone's interested, refer to the readings. And then I just wanted to touch on, Pam, what you said at the end in terms of like sensing other types of beings. The eye of God that we talked about, right? Like removing 11 specific meditation obstacles. So your mind becomes so clear, and that it's really a superpower that we have. That form of consciousness can perceive beyond just the senses that we have. What I've heard is in retreat, for example, let's say you were to go into a silent retreat for an extended period of time, you have a really strict diet, you have a really strict schedule every day, you're getting more and more refined, more and more disconnected from the objects of the senses and worldly distractions, and more single pointed in your ability to focus and your ability to perceive. And in a scenario like that, you might get subtle perceptions that there are more beings around than we realize. So I've heard stories, even from teachers I've had, of a sense that there was someone in their retreat space with them that had a different form. It wasn't a human, but it had some sort of, and it usually represented some aspect of their mind that they were still trying to clarify, right? It's some like latent desire. They could tell, maybe they were working a lot with fear, and they could feel the presence of a fearful being nearby, someone who's maybe attracted to that same sort of state of mind. So your question just made me think of that. I hope that adds some fodder. And maybe Thomas, do you mind, just since you mentioned question 5, just wrapping that up for us, and then we'll end with question 4?
Sure. Well, I think I already answered it. It's like you need to see your parents and you need to be attracted to it, thinking, that looks fun, I want to do that too. And then you're stuck in the womb.
Cool.
And that's how you get back into the human realm.
Mm-hmm.
But we're really interested in what that experience is, what it would be like. Like, how do you get at the end of the bardo into that human womb? So it's kind of an interesting, like, how would you explain that kind of thing? I think I said that right. If I didn't, Marissa, correct me, please.
Yes, thank you, Thomas.
I'm also curious if, are they ever not attracted to it? Do they ever see their parents making love and they're like, I don't want to go near that?
So that was going to be what I was going to say is, I think my understanding is it's the force of the desire that is changing the screen that you're seeing in front of you, right? If everything that you see in front of you moment to moment is just like, it's like a movie screen, it's like something flashing by, what the basis of all of these teachings are is that it's some force in our mind that's creating that projection. So for a bardo being, it's desire. It's, and specifically desire directed at the distant form of their parents making love. And that desire is the thing, they're not actually physically moving from, here to over there with their parents. It's the desire is so strong in their mind, it creates another projection of, I want to be a part of that. I want to be close to that. Keeps going, right? Desire begets desire. You're going to keep going and multiplying those moments, and all of a sudden something that was ethereal and translucent turns into solidity, opaqueness. You find yourself inside the womb. So it's desire is that force. So I don't know if that touches on that earlier point, and I think we should all ask ourselves this: the worlds that we're talking about, every single realm that we've mentioned in this course, every single corner of the bardo realm, they're right here. They're nowhere else. They're just either available to you if your mind is forced to perceive them or not. So to travel from one to the other, it's the movement of the mind. It's karmas. There's no, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so does it matter? So I'm assuming it doesn't matter whether that desire is a positive or a negative desire. It's like whether it's for or against, it's still a strong desire. Is that the case here? Yeah,
it's a great question, and the desire that keeps us in the desire realm, it, as you're saying, it has little to do with whether what you're desiring is good or bad, and it's more the flavor of, that's why we call it ignorant desire. It's the idea that that thing outside of me that I see that I either want or I don't want, in itself has the power to give me that. It's
right, because that's why they say no fixed thoughts for or against, because yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense. It's that desire tinged with misunderstanding, or the desire tinged with ignorance. That's karma. Karma it's a stained thing. We're going to get into that tonight. Remember, there is, and I don't think we've talked about that yet in this course, but there is, think about if you've ever heard of anything around a Buddha and a Buddha's karma, an enlightened being's karma. Notice that those things, we don't usually, linguistically, you don't say that. That isn't to say that enlightenment isn't brought about by causes and conditions, but when we talk about the causes in the movements of mind, in an enlightened mind, they become merit, right? If we look at our dedication at the end of every class, we say the collection of merit, the collection of wisdom. So something about the same force of karma, but freed from ignorance, freed from that fixation to self-existence. That is, so I just want to be clear that does exist. It's what creates a Buddha. But karma is the thing that keeps you within samsara, within the cycle of life. It's the mechanism of the inside of this circle. And so when we say desire, ignorant desire, think about it that way. Not the desire to get enlightened for the sake of all beings.
Supriya.
Yeah.
You have you heard anything in Buddhist texts or trainings about the self-awareness level of a bardo being?
I haven't.
Okay.
But I will say, out of all the ACIs, this is the one I'm least familiar with. Just because for me, it's probably the one that's it's most difficult to put into daily practice.
Yeah.
You know, I think about karma all the time, or the 6 perfections, or some of the lessons in Lojong. The Buddhist debate. I love going through the world with that frame of mind. But up until I was preparing to share this course, I did not think that much about bardo beings.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more in here, and the Abhidharma Kosha is like a magnificent text. The reading has a lot of, the commentary pulled out, but it's not the full thing. Right? Like this whole course is just a commentary on one chapter out of the 10 chapters of this great book. So. Okay, so I do just quickly want to go through question 4 before we dive into class 6 content. So question being, can you be diverted from, let's say, bardo hell into a different rebirth of your choosing? So someone chime in from group 4, please.
I think I got tasked with doing this even though I wasn't here last week. So apologies to everyone that our group struggled a little bit with this question. So we actually ended up going back to the readings and the materials. And it sounds like in general, no, that once you're in the bardo, you're in the, I don't know if form is the right word, but you've already sort of, your karma's determined what your rebirth will be. But there was discussion of one exception around the possibility of reaching nirvana between death and rebirth, which, other than the comments in the materials, I'm not sure exactly how that plays out. So I don't know if you want to expand on that to help us.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, you got it. So yes, typically, no, you cannot divert. Once you're in the bardo, you are destined, not by anything outside of your own karma, but you are destined by your karma to experience the rebirth associated with the bardo that you're in. Bardo animals become turtles. Bardo hell beings become hell beings, right? The one exception is what Kelly mentioned. it is possible, they say, to achieve a state of nirvana, a state free from all mental afflictions that depends on the direct perception of emptiness as a bardo being. It is possible, they say, but don't bet on it. Don't decide that that's going to be your ticket out. It's very difficult. Use your time now. That's the main, that's what we sort of talked about last time, right? Where it's possible. I feel like you see that a lot in Buddhism, right? Like they're not going to say it's one way or the other, for sure. They're going to leave room for all possibilities. So it's possible, maybe because it happened once or because it hasn't been proven that it can't happen. But it would behoove you to not wait until that moment to try to strive for nirvana.
And they're saying that the thing that's possible is that as a bardo being, you would have the direct perception of emptiness and be reborn without any mental afflictions.
It would, I'm trying to think, is nirvana outside of the cycle of rebirth? I think it is.
No, because you can be in nirvana as like a human. You look the same.
Oh yes, nirvana with something left behind, nirvana with nothing left behind. Yeah, okay, cool. So don't quote me on the direct perception of emptiness thing. That might be just a prerequisite for those in the human realm striving for nirvana, but it does say you could be a bardo being and you could achieve nirvana.
Okay.
So yeah, I would take that as you could have a rebirth where you see yourself permanently free from all mental afflictions, not yet fully enlightened.
You must be doing something really powerful right at the time of your death to like have that be the...
Yeah, that's the idea, or have a very advanced training where you're actually able to perceive yourself as a bardo being, have an awareness of your own awareness, and do some sort of practice at that time. Yeah.
If you were a bardo being and you achieve nirvana, then, but it's not outside the cycle of rebirth, then what are you reborn as? Is it the same track that you would previously been on? It's just that you're in nirvana in that track?
I have no idea. I really don't. And they don't go in, everything I've heard about this is sort of just a warning of like, don't inquire too much about this because don't try to do this. Don't bet on it kind of thing. So right. I don't know. I can only like speculate what it would be.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But could like non-humans achieve nirvana? Like wouldn't it have to be that you're taking...
Yeah, because already they're a non-human because they're a bardo being. So it's a different type of being already. And I can't say what kind of being they would be once they've attained nirvana.
Yeah, okay.
Which I think was Marissa's question as well.
Got it.
Sorry, a lot of I don't knows there. I can try to follow up on these and hopefully have an answer next week. Anything outside of these 5 questions that's sort of sitting with you all, it's hard to, I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy or normal, but anything that's sort of like a roadblock in your own mind to kind of keep going because it's only about to get stranger in this class. All right, okay, so hold on to whatever understanding of karma and emptiness you have. Class 6. So today or tonight we're going to talk, and yeah, we should be good. We have an hour. The types of sustenance and the physical world. So and you'll see how detailed the description of the physical world and how that world came into being is in the Abhidharma Kosha. This text is considered the the source of Buddhist cosmology and I want to say the word phenomenology, but I don't exactly know what that means. Definitely Buddhist cosmology, anything that relates to how the world came into being and stays in being. But first, before we get into all of that, this first question is basically talking about sustenance, the things that keep beings alive within the 3 realms of suffering. So to bring us all the way back to class 1, we're talking broadly about 3 major realms, right? Desire realm, formless realm. Most of the beings we've looked at live in this desire realm, propelled by this ignorant desire that we talked about, unknowingly locking themselves in suffering because of their own misunderstanding about the way their world appears. These are humans, animals, hell beings, which we haven't gotten into yet, right? There's a whole list. We went over those. Slightly better yet still temporary existence, form realm beings, the gods and the goddesses, right? Not with this physical body, maybe it's a body of light or something like that, still comes to an end. And then formless beings, only mind, no physical form, all 3 suffering realms. None of them are the full state of Buddhahood. And they say that it's because of sustenance that those beings in those 3 realms stay alive, right? And there's 4 types of sustenance. So that's what we'll go through now. The first one is called portion sustenance. I have the Tibetan Kam Gi Si, and called portion sustenance because it's the type of food, type of sustenance that you can create portions of, that you can bite into and ingest. So fancy way of saying food, right? There are actually 2 types here, though. They say gross and subtle. Not gross as in like disgusting. My family at our dinner table, my mom has a rule. We're never allowed to say the word gross or disgusting when it comes to food. It's like always been ingrained in us. We're also not allowed to ever leave food on our plate. We don't waste food. But that's not what gross means here. It's gross as in like coarse or rough. So the idea being there's like a solid coarse type of portion sustenance and a more subtle one. So the gross kind is what we eat, food, human food, animal food, that kind of stuff. But the subtle kind is what, for example, a bardo being would eat. So a bardo being, we talked about how they're also called smell eaters. So they eat smells, which they ingest in portions called sniffs. And everyone laughed, but like Geshe-la said, it's really that. It's like, think about it that way. It's something more subtle, the way you'd like pour honey onto sand and it would just get absorbed. Doesn't produce any sort of excrement or waste is another way of thinking about it, but still a form of sustenance. Yeah, something you can divide up into portions. It could be a pizza, or it could be a smell that you're dividing up into sniffs. So that's the first type. And just think about all the crazy things that we do to hurt each other in order to get our share of portion sustenance, or more than our share of it, and how much we think happiness comes from optimizing our portion sustenance, just as humans. So that's number 1. Number 2, stained contact, or sakche ki rikpa, sakche ki rikpa. Okay, so what this refers to, contact, or stained contact, it's the coming together of 3 things. 1, an object. 2, a sense power. For example, my eye looking at said object. So here's object T, sense power I, examining T, and then consciousness, like the mind itself. Yes. So if, for those of you who've studied ACI 5 or some of the other ACIs, think of 2 and 3 as mental functions and main mind, right? Consciousness is the main mind, and then the sense power, which might be your eye consciousness, your smell consciousness, things like that, are the mental functions. The idea here is that there's a form of sustenance, there's a form of something that keeps us alive that has to do with the contact between something that we want an object of the senses, and then our senses themselves. So the example they give here would be something like a horse has never died a foot away from water, right? If you have a starving horse and they're like hobbling along and they're just a foot away from the water, at that moment, they're not going to die. There's going to be something that sustains them to get to the water. So that becomes this form of sustenance. Yeah? Stay with me. The third one, it's that same kind of idea, a little more detailed. This is stained movement of mind, so sakche ki sempa. And this is, okay, so one way to think about this, it's mental karma. So it's the movement, you know how we talk about karma as the movement of the mind and what follows. The movement of the mind and then what you do or say. Right? That movement of, we're very preoccupied with the doing and the saying, those types of karmas. But the movement of the mind, that's the, Geshe says, the karma behind all karma, right? That thing that's really motivating it. So that is a form of sustenance, they say, because it sustains the speech and the actions that follow. But then the principal example here is hope. They say hope, that state of mind, for example, like hope when you're really close to starvation, is the primary example of how you could actually be sustained just by the movement of mind. So here they share a story about like a starving family, and the father, he took a bag of dust, but tied it up and told the family, oh, it's a bag of flour. When it gets really bad, don't worry, we'll open it up and we'll have that as sustenance. And as long as, until the dad kept reassuring them, oh yeah, we have this bag of flour, we have this bag of flour, the family was okay. They somehow were able to sustain. But as soon as the day came where they opened it up and saw that it was dust, they expired. This is a hope expired. So hope is the example they use here, that you can actually live off of that. You can be sustained off of that. And then number 4, stained consciousness, or sakche ki namshe. So that is, this is the mind itself. So the idea being, without a mind, there wouldn't be consciousness at all. And remember, I know we've touched upon this a bit before, but when I say mind, I'm not saying brain. The Western view is primarily that our consciousness originates from the organ of the brain. Buddhism doesn't hold that to be true. The idea is you could be, I'm trying not to say, like, give an example too gory. The brain will disintegrate, but that has nothing to do with the mind, the consciousness. So it's not that the brain gives rise to consciousness, it's actually the other way around. Consciousness gives rise to the brain and everything else, according to this system. So that consciousness itself, specifically linked with an experience of pleasure or desire, that stained consciousness is a form of sustenance itself. And this number 4, sakche ki namshe, is the sustenance. It's the thing that sustains from life, that sustains through life, death, bardo, rebirth. Life, death, bardo, rebirth. That thing, that I call it the noodle, that unbroken noodle with no beginning and no end, that's that consciousness. So I really think of it as that thing that sustains. The body goes away, the personality goes away. Everything you've ever achieved or desired or worked towards or collected and put into storage, all of that goes away, but something does sustain. So those are the 4 types of sustenance.
I have a couple questions. One is if you can talk more about the word stained and why that's the word. It's tripping me up. And 2, can you talk more about number 2? Because it seemed, someone pointed this out in the chat, that it seems also like hope. And then is there an example of the sustenance aspect that sustains the unbroken, what I call soul, or what is called mind? What is the food? What is the sustenance that's sustaining it?
Cool, yes. So your first question, stained, we're gonna get into that, or sakje in Tibetan. That's coming up next, I promise, so just hold on for that. Number two, thank you. Actually, your question reminded me, it does sound a lot like hope. Another way to think about it, it's actually, you know that saying that like we eat, their eyes were bigger than their stomach kind of thing, like the joy that you get from eating a great meal. They say that that would be an example of stained contact, right? Or any sense, imagine the joy you get from hearing something from far away before you get close, or the memory triggered by smell. So just that little bolt of joy that sustains you, that would be an example of stained contact. I think hope is also an example there, but hope is a stronger example for number three, if you're trying to find a way to remember it. So that was your second question. And then third, oh yes, so the thing that sustains consciousness itself, they would say it's existing on a continuum. So my consciousness today, it's very easy for me to see how it's a result of my consciousness yesterday. And it's the cause of my consciousness tomorrow. So it's existing on a continuum. That would be the way to link previous and next moments of consciousness.
It's sustained by itself then. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll get into the stained, I promise. I think it comes here actually. So
I think, Supriya, also 2 and 3. 2 seems to be more experiential, and 3 seems to be more analytical. So in 2, there's that one of your sense powers is actually taking in something that you then have to label and give a name to, but it's an actual experience. And hope is really strictly conscious or strictly mental.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. And like, if, these are long phrases, you can summarize it as the 4 types of sustenance are portion, contact, movement of mind, and consciousness. We're going to get to what the stained means. But yeah, when I think of that, Thomas, I think you're spot on. Okay, so why are we talking about sustenance? The idea here, according to the Abhidharma Kosha, living beings stay here because of sustenance, aka beings need sustenance to stay alive. This is from the 3rd chapter of the Abhidharma Kosha. And as soon as we see stay here, should have like a little asterisk pop up in your mind, here being samsara. This cyclic existence where we're either up or we're down and we don't truly ever understand why. So what they're saying here is, out of those 3 realms that we talked about, all beings in the desire, form, and formless realm have the last 3 types of sustenance. They have contact, movement of mind, and consciousness. Only desire realm beings use the first type of sustenance, right? Portion or food sustenance. So remember, one way we talked about moving through these realms, it actually has to do with what you're able to let go of. The desires you're able to let go of, right? You move from the desire realm to the form realm by letting go of the desires of the objects of the senses. That's what allows you to actually ascend. But we don't need to split hairs here. It all does boil down to all of those sustenances that we just mentioned. They function only to perpetuate suffering life. So, and I know the language here is really strong. That word sakje or stained, translates as polluted or corrupted or something samsaric, basically. Something that only functions to keep you in samsara. Meaning, and the way I interpret the line, you know, the 4 types of sustenance are the very root of sickness, cancer, and agony. They help bring about old age and death. That lands for me as the things we do to obtain those 4 types of sustenance, right? For ourselves versus for others. The relationships and behaviors we have around those 4 forms of sustenance, that's what keeps us locked in this cycle that we don't even realize we're in. Or, you know, on a more basic level, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, really, how well you take care of your body, how healthy you eat, or if you have the exact right cocktail of adaptogens. Like, at some point, it's going to expire and there's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't, and maybe you'll add a few years, but that final moment, they say it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if there's no such thing as dying peacefully in your sleep or surrounded by loved ones. That the mental anguish that happens at that moment is so intense. And those 4 types of sustenance are not doing anything other than keeping us in this realm of samsara, samsara, as I say. I'll add this quickly. Hopefully this gets at what you were saying, Marissa, too. I couldn't find it in the reading, but when Geshe Michael shared this course, he shared like a little Garden of Eden story almost from the Abhidharma Kosha, from this chapter. And he sort of described these beings that lived in a world where, so they were like ethereal, made of light. He didn't specify what realm they were in, but they lived in this world where everything was provided for them. Like if they felt a little bit of hunger come on, they could just like bend down, scoop up the earth and have a bite, and it would sustain them. You know, right? They would just like scoop up. The ground was their food, kind of thing. And what happened was, you know, so they subsisted like that for a while, and then what happened was some of them realized like, oh, they basically discovered stockpiling. They realized like, oh, I don't have to just, you know, act upon when the desire comes. I could actually, you know, go and get some sustenance for myself and my family and keep it with me. And I could then construct a house to sort of protect all of this so no one sees what I'm doing. And all of a sudden this world became solidified and real. That looks a lot like the world that we operate in, right? The things that we do to a place that would otherwise provide for us fully. The idea in that story, I'm probably not relaying it in the way it should be, but the idea there being, there's something twisted about the way we are interacting with things. That's what makes things stained. It's not inherently that the things are poisonous. It's the misunderstanding I have in my mind about that thing, and then subsequently the things I'm willing to do to get it, that messes me up. That's what it means by stained. And it starts a pattern of behaving that way over and over again. Samsara is just a really bad habit. It's a terrible pattern.
How is it that, like, that makes sense to me for portion sustenance and maybe for contact sustenance because it's connected to something tangible that you would eat. And maybe even like the hope and those, like that kind of idea, but stained consciousness as sustenance, like if that is the consciousness itself, you know, sustaining itself across lifetimes, what is agony and cancerous and stained about that?
Yeah. The thing that popped into my mind was thinking about what's the difference between the consciousness of someone stuck in samsara versus the consciousness of an enlightened being. And we talk all the time, right? I was saying the emptiness of my mind is exactly the same thing as the emptiness of a Buddha's mind. Like that potential, that capacity, it's identical in both. So I would say what makes it stained is our mistaken relationship to it. Like, I think no matter how much I try, I see my consciousness as that, as mine, as this thing that's attached to my personality. It's very hard for me to get outside of that vantage point. I think that's what makes it stained, because that makes me act in certain ways and see the world in a certain way.
I see. And that is how the human realm and also the form realm would think of that consciousness, like as if they own it. Or even the form realm.
Yeah. And it could be a sense of ownership, or just some sort of a sense of self to it. The mistake that it's not empty of a nature, that it's not somehow caused moment to moment, but rather just exists out there somehow. That would be the quality of consciousness in all the suffering realms, desire, form, and formless.
Interesting. Huh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, this is going to be a quick little detour. It's not a homework question, but it was shared in all the prior versions of this course. So that presentation, it's very, it's kind of dark. I get that. It's also, it's not meant to say, like, don't take care of your body. Don't care about your health. So I wanted to share this list because hopefully this inspires us to actually treat with utmost care the only vehicle that we currently have, right? Like, it is the thing that it absolutely affects my mind, right? I am more than a mind. So this is what I've got. I've got to take care of this. This is also from the Abhidharma Kosha. Geshe-la talks about it as the thing that nourish you or flourish you. So I thought of flourishment, not just nourishment. But these 4 things, this is food. There is a purpose for eating well and sustaining yourself in a way that you can serve others. Or even thinking of the act of partaking in food, like every bite, as something that's giving you the energy to serve other beings, or to be able to meditate, to be able to investigate your reality. There's beautiful practices around food, and that's important. So that this is, the idea here isn't to reject that, but rather transform it. That's the first one, kase. Number 2, lekja, doing good. This isn't doing good deeds. It's taking care of your body. The specific examples given were massage and baths. So this is like the Buddhist, the Abhidharma version of self-care. 4 ways of getting flourishment. So taking care of your physical form. Number 3, sleep, not too much, not too little. And then the last one, Tingyan Zin, for those who've taken ACI 3, you'll remember this. It's a state in meditation called single-pointed concentration. And the idea being that you can actually get a real sense of nourishment by doing the opposite of multitasking. When your mind can actually happily stay on one thing for an extended period of time. That would actually be the way to start to lose a sort of sense of desire for food or for more worldly things. Because you actually get a sense of energy, and it does sustain you. That's that state of mind to be able to be single pointed on one thing. So I look a lot to meditators that I admire or practitioners that I admire, and they actually have a practice around all 4 of these things that's very inspiring. Like, it's very exalted, the way they take care of themselves. It's not indulgent, it's not lazy. It's right in between, it's very purposeful. Everything they do is purposeful because they understand they right now they're in the one vehicle they have to get to that state of freedom from everything. actually being able to love all beings. So they're doing everything with that in mind, not to just get this body in its optimized form. That's not going to do anything. But the consciousness that this body houses, to be able to have an experience there. Like a professional athlete. Yes, Kelly. I don't know if anyone else has seen Cheer, but my sister and I recently binged it, and it's insane. I mean, or anything you've seen around, people very committed to their craft, professional athletes, concert pianists, like those types of people where everything they do is with that one goal in mind. And it doesn't mean they stop eating or taking care of their body or sleeping. They're just doing it. They're doing it. All these things are tools. They're not the goal. It's never about any of these four things. It's just about using these towards some sort of higher goal. So yes. Okay, that was a little detour. Now the trippier stuff. So we're getting into cosmology. Little context here before we're going to go through the Abhidharma presentation of how the world came into being. And just take a moment now. I really had to think about it. Where did you first learn how this world that we're currently experiencing came into being? Like maybe you remember learning about it in school or reading about it because we're still discovering it. But just ask yourself, like, who first presented that model to you? Like I Googled, how did our world come into being? And there's lots of stuff. All of it almost it starts with the universe is believed to have been created by XYZ, right? Or Earth is believed to have been formed by XYZ. Or one of the theories are, right? Like we have ways of analyzing this stuff, but there's no certainty. So all I'm asking is, what's the dominant theory you already have in your mind? Because you probably have one. This thing this experience we're having right now, how did it come into being? How did this planet come into being? Think about that, and then give yourself permission to let go of that. Just for the rest of this class, I'm just presenting a model. I'm not saying take it, but I'm also saying don't throw it out, because what you currently have is also just a model. It's also just something someone's told you. And then a lot of things that keep it real for you, right? Maybe because other people agree or because it's what it's taught. I don't know. But just keep that in mind. What I'm presenting here from the Abhidharma perspective, this didn't come from, like they didn't have scientific tools or technology. The idea is this very detailed presentation, which you'll see came from an experience someone had in meditation. That's where we're getting this from. So that's something to keep in mind. So what we're talking about in Tibetan, Jikten Lungki Kilnkor. So this is the world, or the perishable base, wind energy of the mandala. So how I think the right order of this phrase is escaping me right now, but the idea is, according to the Abhidharma, the formation of the world came about from this giant wind energy that created, it was formed in this spinning disc or mandala. That's really what mandala translates into. It's this disc. It's this lung or wind energy swirling in this disc that then created the world, created a world that will end. So notice the word perishable there. Here's some more details. So the idea is, step one, there was a foundation that lies below this world. It first just consisted of nothing but empty space. This isn't like empty like a code word or anything, like empty like the concept empty. This is just literally empty space. then began this formation of a new world. It started with a gentle force of wind, or lung, swirling about itself over a period of many years. Keep in mind, this is generally also the theory we hold to be true for our solar system. We say it was this cloud of dust and gas, and it like this giant molecular cloud that basically started to collapse in on itself due to gravity and began spinning. And with the sun in the center. This is my rudimentary understanding of that. But I thought it was interesting that there was some synergy there. But the idea being that this disk of wind gained speed and it actually became solidified. And so strong in its center that even a massive diamond, like the hardest substance in the world, couldn't crack it. So that's the Abhidharma perspective of the creation of the world. Take it as another theory in the many that you've heard.
Supriya, when they say world,
yeah,
they mean, maybe they don't even define it, but like the planet, multiple, the universe, like.
Yeah, someone asked that same question, and you'll see when we get to more detailed charts, the analogous thing would be Earth, what we call Earth, the planet, rather than the universe. Yeah, so world, planet. So that's that. Here's a little visual for you. This is that solidified disk that began as this gentle wind swirling, with some more specific measurements for you from the Abhidharma Kosha. So they didn't actually use miles at that time. They used this unit called yojanas, which a yojana is about, or here, 7 million miles. So like the height of this disk that you're seeing is about 1,600,000 yojana. Or another way to think of it is this diameter that you see, 4.5 times 10 to the 60th, which is also called a countless eon. A countless yojana equals 4.5 times 10 to the 60th million miles. So another unit of measurement. Here it is in a little bit more detail. So according to the Abhidharma Kosha, in the world, in the center of the world is Mount Meru. That, in this mandala gesture that we make, is what your ring fingers are doing. It's that mountain in the center. And so they say around Mount Meru, there are 7 concentric mountain ranges, which are gold in form. And then on the outer ring of the world, it's a mountain range made of iron. And then you have in the 4 directions, 4 continents. So to the east, you have this continent with the elements there have a silver quality. To the north, they have a gold quality. To the west, ruby. And the clouds are there because the idea is that from whatever your vantage point is at Mount Meru, if you're looking to the west, for example, you would see a ruby sky signifying the continent that was there in that direction. And then to the south, I put a star here because it's like, you know, those mall signs, like the "you are here." That's where the human realm is said to be. We're said to be on the continent of Zambuling, and that is a lapis hue. So I think it was Mackenzie, you asked about the 4 continents. Here they are, according to the Abhidharma Kosha. Mount Meru, surrounded by mountain ranges, and then the 4 continents in each direction.
Do you know if this has anything to do with like feng shui? Because I know like in I don't know. I think it might be two different systems, but I know with feng shui, it has like directions associated with different elements and like the iron range and all that makes me think of it.
I don't know if it has anything directly to do with it, but one thing that they were talking about in this, so the Abhidharma Kosha is also the source of a lot of Tibetan medicine, which is very detailed, and it makes me think a lot of Chinese medicine and Ayurveda because it is based on the elements and the idea that as the 4 elements exist in the world of wind, water, earth, and fire, they exist in our forms as well. And just in the same way as Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, any sort of dis-ease in the body or ailment in the body is just an imbalance between those 4 elements, right? So that got me thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if this somehow ended up influencing feng shui. But I don't know for sure. So your specific questions are, think about the 9 mountains in this depiction of the world. So that would be Mount Meru in the center, your 7 concentric ranges surrounding it. So that's 7 plus 1 plus 1, the final one, the iron ring called the encircling range on the outside. Yeah, do you see that? 1 plus 7 concentric circles is 8 plus 1, 9 on the outside. I don't know if you all can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor when I move it? Yes, okay, great. So yeah, you have 1 plus 7 plus 1. So 9 mountains in the system. And then 3 oceans. I have not been able to work out the math in this, but what the answer key was saying is that there's an innermost ocean, which is like the center of the tightest mountain range. And then 7 seas, which doesn't make sense to me because between 7 rings would be 6 seas. So I'm a little lost on the math there, but the idea is that there's 1 inner, there's 7 in between all the rings, and then there's what's called the outer ocean, which is this space in between the last golden ring and the iron ring, which are mountains. So 3 oceans. The inner one, the one in between all these golden mountain ranges, and then the one in between the last golden and the iron. This is what you are depicting with your hands in this image. I don't know if you can see me, but center is Mount Meru. The 4 points are the 4 continents. So, and then,
I don't know if I missed this. What's on all the other mountains?
What do you mean?
Like, could they be different realms, or like, is it different universes? What kind of beings live there? Like, is there life on Mars type of thing?
Yeah. I'd assume that all the beings that because we're talking about how the suffering world comes into being. And so it's the home of all suffering realms. So like here you can see the idea is the continent of Zambuling hosts all the humans. You can see the levels of the form realm here atop Mount Meru. I think we're going to get to your question by the end, Mackenzie. But the idea is that this map, with whatever degree of self-existence you decide to give it, is home to all the beings that we've discussed. And I know it's odd. All I ask us to think about is it's kind of equally odd that we draw geographical borders and come up with names or co-opt names for places. And, you know, our system of this, our experience on this planet is also just a model put onto an experience. So as I said, take it with an open mind. Take it like, what if this were what you learned in kindergarten? This is the way the world is. Like, it's not that different. It's not that out there compared to some of the maps that we have. What is it about the map that we have that we take to be true? is it just because we can verify it with a scientific instrument? I think we have time for this. Before we, okay, cool, yeah. Before we end, I actually wanted to read you all. This is what Hector did in this class, because I gave you as much detail as I could. There's a lot more in the reading. But Hector, for those of you who know him, I think many of you do, he wrote a poem for his teacher after his teacher taught him the Abhidharma Kosha. The Abhidharma Kosha presentation of the world. And so it's really fun. It's beautiful. It's a little long, so it might take like 7-ish minutes, but I was hoping to just read it out for you all so you can sort of get Hector's interpretation of this model. And you'll see some of the details we talked about there. But does that sound good? And then we'll end with the sort of final note and dedicate. Okay, so just relax. As I said, this is something he composed for his teacher upon studying this presentation of the world. It began as if I floated in an emptiness too vast, like one particle in a vacuumous infinity of black. My whole being was resonating with vibrations from a far-off swirling cloud that encompassed all this black. And the cloud had gained momentum as it spun in all its flare, moving in concentric circles of fantastic thick blue air. As it grabbed and pulled me closer with each turn of its great arms toward its compact humming beacon in the center of its eye. I had traveled 5 to the power of 60 times 4.5 miles, maybe. It was something of such likeness, but in yojanas, you see. Yojana being that unit we talked about. I was now submerged in something like primeval white clear waters as I moved my body upwards, wishing I had brought some floaters. Side note, okay, Hector has a beautiful Australian accent, so waters and floaters rhyme. I'm gonna insert little side notes for you. After 3.6 million miles of this underwater risk, I broke ground into the floor of a solid golden disc, and then working my way upward through the solid golden disc of 11 million miles of sublime eternity. I was just about to surface through underwater, it did seem, and once more I was emerging from 360,000 miles deep. And with a breath that stretched my chest, I surfaced, splashing up toward the light, like a single ship survivor dwarfed by a glorious sight that I knew was called Mount Meru, central mountain of all skies. Now I hung above it all and paused. Pointing downward, I did leap over 7 mountain ranges and into 7 blissful seas. And I made my way to the eastern continent of white, populated by double beings twice as tall and twice as mighty as a normal human being. Then I was taken up in a hand too large to fathom and too fast to have been seen, and I dropped into Kerplop land. That's what he calls Zambulang, the continent of humans, the Lapis one to the south, Kerplop land, the continent where humans live. Upon landing, I could hear throughout the blue of its horizons countless human generations teaching Dharma through all nations. And once more, I was now spinning like gold dust in giant's palm, carried swiftly from Kerplop to a circle-shaped land. And on landing there, I was dwarfed both in number and in size by too many people and their cattle covering this gold circle land. I think this would be the north in gold. And from there, I was now flying, or somehow I had seemed to fly, to a square yellow continent up upon the far northern side. Okay, now we're in the north. And on that yellow square continent, I landed, my mortality intact, there encountering ancient beings who were just about to die. On the verge of 500 years, each one of them have heard announced that they had but 7 mortal days before returning to the ground. Hopefully sounds familiar, the formless realm. The form realm, I mean. They each spoke of too many years of the nectars of a life, far too long to recognize that the very act of living was but suffering disguised. too long to keep the Dharma or alertness in their minds, not knowing that on emptiness was where their salvation lied. And with my eyes newly opened, both externally and inside, I flew over each huge continent and touched down on either side, on their replicas in miniature, systematically left and right, left and right. How could I know of such things that transform my very being, things I couldn't have conceived were it not for Geshe-la, his teacher, who had offered them to me? So my heart was transformed and my yearnings went with it. And I wanted all so passionately to give thanks for these great things. Hence, I thought to offer something for these truly wondrous sights, and I thought of a great mountain rising high into the sky, like the size of all of Asia and perhaps 4 times as high. And on wishing it appeared this mountain of crystal brittle covering all the eastern continent, but somehow it seemed too little. For what else could I have wished for as an offering for your teachings? And I realized that wishes would be such a clever thing. That upon this thought appeared a most wondrous tree, made of silver trunk and golden roots and a many precious thing. It had covered all of human land in its vastness and its splendor, and in its shadows surrendered all the ignorance of the world. And I knew that every wish could be granted from this land, and somehow I wanted more for you, perhaps on a circular land. And upon this thought appeared a huge cow of pinkish gold, with its diamond horns and sapphire hooves, far too beautiful for words. More of wish-fulfilling tree bits that I talked about before was now growing from its tail end, making wishes free for all. And from all this wishing frenzy, offering, I offer thee, I realized the square continent was as bare as can be, with too many tortured beings. So I saw a land abundant in spontaneous growing crops, so the 500-year-old peoples would have to suffer no more. And they feasted in their abundance, and I hope they stay that way, at least until the 37th pile when this offering would end. Then I look up to the heavens as if to catch a glimpse of you, and I saw the sky was bare, not appropriate, too blue. So I covered all the eastern skies with this brilliant golden disk. It was awesome in its size and its capabilities. I could just catch it as it traveled too fast for the eye to see, and I knew it held the meaning of awareness to keep. And the southern skies were also bare, and I wished for thee a most precious holy object, a blue jewel as big can be. In the distance, it would heal all the folk that crossed its splendor, and I knew this jewel was joy of compassionate surrender. And onto the western skies I peered with intentions to adorn it, as a prayer of my offerings or perhaps a bribe for blessings. I imagined in this spot a most beauteous a queen who was really very hot, and from her soft skin exhumed a most sweet lotus aroma, as if ripening or blossoming. She was bliss in her persona. Bliss experienced in the body and sometimes within the mind of an arduous meditator with his vision on his sight. Then I traveled to the northern skies and with a minister adorned it. He was wise and undeceitful, balancing Dharma and world politics. A great symbol of meditation, he could manage all great nations as if with some special powers that with practice was perfection. Now the skies were truly covered with these 4 tremendous objects. I multiplied them by the zillions and then had my holy subject, which was made for you, O Geshe-la, for your practice and your teaching, for continuously building bridges, making sure the Dharma reaches the potentials in our hearts. So to you we offer wisdom as a massive, tall, white elephant, same in size as the Himalayas, but yet gentle in his stare. And to you we offer effort as a painted supreme horse, full with precious jewel trappings, trotting towards his special goal. And to you we offer neutral mind as the general of the emperor, full of power and of splendor, a compassionate motivator, to treat all our friend or foe as a brother to adore. So please now accept our offering. May you live long and teach often. May you bless us with your wisdom and your visions of the world. May you sense our gratitude for your efforts and your kindness, which has brought light to our blindness and will make us soar. So I hope you caught some of the code in there. I thought it was beautiful, and it's what we're invited to do when we recite the mandala offering. Like, I was having a conversation earlier about pricing around some of the 3 jewels options. We do some corporate work, and the one thing we never have to have pricing conversations around is Dharma, because you can't really put a price on this stuff. Like, there's no way for me to put a price on, I'm not giving you any realizations here, but there's no way to put a price on the realizations that are already there, available to you in your own mind, just waiting to be activated. So what we do is, instead we do this mandala offering. There's no price, worldly price we could put on it. So you create this vision in your mind, and you could hear how you can't think of an offering high enough if you were to truly conceive of the possibility of this wisdom in your world. So we do the mandala offering. It's a bribe to your teacher, that part of you that is your teacher, in exchange for Dharma. So that's the hectorized version of the world via the Abhidharma perspective. Let's end with this. So this all just isn't, some fantastical thing, which maybe that is, how it's landing for you. But there's 3 ways we can think about Master Vasubandhu's explanation. And next week I'll share a little bit more about Master Vasubandhu, who wrote the Abhidharma Kosha, but actually as a practitioner and as a teacher really embodied the Prasangika mindset. So for those of you familiar with the schools of thought in Buddhism, the way the schools of thought are delineated is based on their I don't want to say understanding, their understanding of emptiness, the way they work with the concept of emptiness. That's what creates these schools of thought in Buddhism. So the one that we started with, right, class 1, question 11, was the highest school of thought, Majjhimika Prasangika, saying everything is entirely 100% empty of a nature and exists completely as a projection from your own mind. That was not the only form of emptiness that the Buddha taught. There's others. The Abhidharmists or the detailists have a different understanding of emptiness. Hence all the explanations of a world that seems to exist self-existently, even, we find in the Abhidharma Kosha. But anyways, here, so you can think about what we just presented as literal, right? So one thought here is Master Vasubandhu, he was in ancient India. He saw Mount Everest. That inspired this thing he called Mount Meru, and he was very much literal. He saw that mountain, it mesmerized him, and he depicted a world with that at its center. That you could take it as a literal explanation. You could take it as a metaphor. So some people say, oh, well, Master Vasubandhu didn't believe it himself, but he knew that there were people out there that this explanation of the world would help them. So he was speaking to those who did, right? Or the one whose implications are sweetest is karma and emptiness. Asking yourself, why doesn't the world appear to us like this? And arriving upon investigation, not because I'm saying it, but because you keep asking and you don't take no for an answer. Why does anything appear like anything to you? Well, at some point you're going to arrive at it's empty of a nature. It's empty of being that way from its own side. I am forced to experience the world a certain way. And it's like that childish thing, when kids are just like asking like, but why? Why is it that way? Why does it have to be that way? Like we all had that at some point and it probably got squashed. Karma and emptiness allows us to be like that again and keep asking why. Why is the model of the world that was taught in school the one I'm going to take? What's the implication if I really see the world that way? Could the world that we just described, the world that inspires poetry, like we just heard, actually be a valid experience of the world? That's what brings us to number 3. The thing that I kept thinking about with here, it probably didn't come across in this class because the details really escaped me with this Abhidharma perspective, but I actually am like a huge space nerd. And one of my favorite classes I took in college was humans in spaceflight. My professor was an astronaut. So he'd been into space 3 separate times for 27 days total. And it was amazing. And we used to have a lecture every week, and the last 20, 30 minutes, he would just leave open and we could ask him whatever we wanted about what it was like to be in space. And I'll always remember one of his, I think someone was really, like basically every week someone tried to ask him, do you believe in aliens? Like in different language, so to not be obvious about it. But once he gave this answer that always stuck with me, he was describing the experience of actually being out in space and looking at planet Earth. And after I heard him say it, I realized, it's something you can Google. It happens to a lot of astronauts called the overview effect. But it's this thing they're hit with where they look at our planet, and from their vantage point, it's this tiny blue dot. And it looks very fragile, they say. It looks fragile and like it's just hanging in this void, like hanging in this expanse of darkness and this expanse of things that would completely destroy a human if you had even a millisecond of contact with that. And he said that he would be filled, he saw the earth from that vantage point and was just filled with a sense of wanting to take care of it. It looked so fragile. He didn't see it as there were no boundaries, there were no continents, there was no species or any of those classifications that we create. It was just home. And it was the only home that could sustain him and the people he loved. And he was overwhelmed with this feeling of, if everyone could just see what I see now, we would act so differently. We would take care of this place in such a different way. We would take care of each other in such a different way. So I think about that a lot. And I think it's the only motivation for studying any model of the world. Like, does it make you feel that? If so, that's going to change that world itself. That's what this system is saying. If you can start to feel that love for your world exactly as it appears now, that love and what it makes you do, because that's love infected with wisdom, that's going to change that very experience of the world. And it could become an enlightened paradise. Like, if this stuff sounds weird, wait till you hear about the depictions of enlightened paradises and the maps for those, So I've been thinking a lot about that these last few days, just prepping. It's called the overview effect. Apparently it happens to a lot of astronauts, and we can try to feel it in meditation or just thinking about it. And the idea is, so you can see it here, and when we do a mandala offering, that is what we're doing. I actually wanted to put this up here because maybe now these words will land a little differently. When we say the great mountain, the 4 continents, now you know what we're talking about. In my mind, I make them the paradise of the Buddha and offer it all to you. Right? That was the essence of Hector's poem. So that's what we're doing now. Let's dedicate, and then we'll have a few moments or minutes to just chat. Yeah, and generally Umse opens and closes, so if you wouldn't mind, Vicky and Marissa, ushering us out.
Sashi Puki. き Jukshin Metoptram Rirab Lengshi Nyende Genpandi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Ulwagi Drokun Namdak Shingla Chupasho Idam Gururatnam Mandulakam Niryatayami Jivadi Kyevokun Sunam Yeshe Satsok Shing Sunam Yeshe Lejung Dampa Kunita Parsho.
Thanks all. I felt very tongue-tied that class. It was very hard to, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around these things. So please come with questions. If you're like salivating, the reading has lots and lots of detail about this. And then these are my housekeeping items. I actually think this week's meditation or contemplation they're all exquisite, but this one's really nice. Imagining the ultimate evolution of this world into a paradise. Makes me think of my yoga teacher says this, if you can't imagine it, what are you practicing for? Like, why do you bother doing it? If you can't, it starts with a thought. It starts with being able to imagine it. So meditation, it is imagination in its highest form. And then announcements, kind of same as usual, but a lot's happening. The cafe is open, as I mentioned. I put 3 Jewels Kids there in case you are a caregiver or know other parents. And lots of ways to get involved, stay involved. I mean, you all are really at the center of it. Dharma is the Mount Meru of 3 Jewels. So that's what I've got. I'm trying to think. Hope to see you all next Tuesday. We're getting there. Happy to, Diego. I couldn't rewatch the chat as much today. Oh.